If you stand on the sunlit piazza of Orvieto and feel the warm stone beneath your feet, you are standing on a secret. The city rises from an island of volcanic rock, a majestic plateau floating above the green Umbrian valleys, serene and unshakable. But few visitors realize that the rock beneath them is not solid. It is hollow, a labyrinth of silence carved across millennia. You are, at this very moment, suspended above an entire hidden world, a city beneath a city that has crept deeper into darkness with every passing century. The streets you stroll are the ceiling of a great mystery, an inverted metropolis that holds the breath of 3,000 years. Local vendors set up their market stalls, church bells ring, and life hums above ground, utterly indifferent to the void that slumbers below. Yet the silence beneath Orvieto is not empty. It is crowded with forgotten pathways, cryptic chambers, and whispered voices trapped in stone. The underground of Orvieto is not a single cave, but a sprawling honeycomb, a nerve system of tunnels, wells, cisterns, and caverns carved from the tuff. Every family in the old city once kept a private key to this underworld, a trapdoor in the cellar that opened onto a dizzying vertical drop into the earth. Some of these hidden shafts descended 5 or 6 stories into the cool, damp darkness, connecting private homes to communal escape routes and oil presses. The full scale of this labyrinth defies easy mapping, because new voids are still discovered every time a modern foundation is laid. When a construction worker's drill unexpectedly bites into empty air, he knows he has struck the invisible geography of another time. The rock itself is a peculiar material, volcanic tuff, soft enough to be carved with hand tools, yet rigid enough to hold complex vaulted ceilings for millennia. This geological gift made Orvieto a fortress above and a canvas below, tempting every civilization that settled here to dig deeper and deeper. And so they dug. Etruscans, Romans, medieval monks, Renaissance nobles, each layer of humanity hollowing out new spaces, erasing old ones, and entangling their secrets. The first systematic exploration of this buried realm began not in antiquity, but in the 1970s, when a group of curious speleologists lowered themselves into a forgotten well. What they found was not just a single cavity, but an interconnected universe of artificial grottos. Some decorated with traces of ancient fresco, some filled with enigmatic tools. They discovered entire underground olive presses, massive millstones frozen mid-turn, as if the workers had simply extinguished their lamps and walked away centuries ago. The air down there is still perfumed with a faint ghost of olive paste, a scent so ancient it feels like breathing in a medieval recipe. The temperature remains a constant, chilly embrace, untouched by the violent summer heat above, preserving a sense of perpetual evening. Each descending step is a journey backward through the strata of time, from modern cellars to wartime bunkers, from Renaissance storerooms to Etruscan cisterns. The light of a lantern falls on walls that bear the pickaxe marks of civilizations whose names have been lost, yet whose works remain acutely present. One of the most astonishing creations is the Pozzo di San Patrizio, St. Patrick's Well, a 16th century engineering marvel that plunges more than 50 meters into the darkness. It was commissioned by a pope fleeing the sack of Rome, a desperate measure to guarantee water for the besieged city. And it is no ordinary well. 2 double-helix ramps spiral down into the shaft, an architectural solution so elegant that donkeys could descend one way laden with skins while emerging unladen the other way. You can walk down those wide, curving steps today, passing stone by stone into a coolness that seems to absorb all sound until the daylight above becomes a distant coin of light. 72 windows are carved into the central cylinder, flooding the lower galleries with an otherworldly glow that shifts like a slow breath. And yet, for all its Renaissance elegance, the well is a latecomer. The true roots of the underground stretch far deeper into the Etruscan past. They carved enormous cisterns, sophisticated systems of channels and filtration basins that collected every drop of rain falling on the rock and channeled it into bell-shaped wells. The precision of their hydraulic engineering still baffles modern surveyors. The slopes, the settling tanks, the deliberate roughness of the surfaces to encourage condensation. Standing at the edge and peering down, you feel a primal vertigo, as if the earth were inviting you into its memory. Archaeologists have also unearthed countless dovecotes, square cells carved high in the cliff walls, where generations of pigeons were bred for food and their valuable droppings for fertilizer. Rows upon rows of small niches, tiered like apartment blocks for the silent winged tenants, still coat the rock faces in obsessive geometric patterns. These coops speak of a practical, self-sufficient city, one that reinforced itself from within, hiding its reserves from the sight of any army marching through the valley. The underground was the city's granary, its water tank, its oilery, its smokehouse, a complete inverted economy humming below the feet of the daily market. But theory collides with enigma when we come to the unlabeled spaces. Chambers that serve no obvious practical purpose, their walls too smooth, their acoustics too resonant. Some are small, squared cells that echo with a strange vibrational hum, leading researchers to speculate about ritual use or perhaps pre-Christian sanctuaries. Others are narrow, sloping passages that vanish into collapsed dead ends, leaving only a trail of unanswered questions and a cold draft. Where archaeology falters, local legend begins to fill the silence with a darker hypothesis. The underground is a labyrinth not merely of storage, but of escape. Oral history whispers of a network of secret tunnels stretching all the way from the cathedral's foundations to the distant Paglia River, a hidden path for popes and princes. No single continuous passage has ever been proven to connect the city center to the valley floor, yet fragments keep turning up, tantalizingly aligned. A blocked archway discovered in a private home cellar might be the entrance. A bricked-up doorway in a riverside cave might be the exit. Another, more chilling tradition claims that certain excavated rooms were not storerooms at all, but places of confinement, silent prisons woven into the rock. The evidence for this is sparse but disturbing. Iron rings set in the walls, narrow ventilation shafts designed for air but not escape, and a pervasive feeling of melancholy in those chambers. To step into such a room is to feel a sudden pressure on the chest, an empathy with every soul who might have listened to the indifference of the stone. Mainstream historians caution against such romantic projections. They argue that rings were used to tether livestock, and the melancholy is merely a case of modern claustrophobia. Yet the debate is the very engine of the mystery. The underground refuses a single, tidy narrative and instead offers contradictory clues depending on where you shine your lamp. World War II added the most recent and most desperate layer of excavation when the ancient caverns were expanded into extensive air raid shelters. Thousands of Orvieto's citizens would descend the candlelit steps each night, carrying blankets and children, to wait out Allied bombardments deep inside the volcanic fortress. Graffiti from that era still marks the soft, tough walls, names, dates, small hearts sketched by trembling hands, a nervous prayer for the morning light. The same chamber that once stored amphorae of olive oil became a dormitory of survival, a palimpsest of human vulnerability and resilience. This continuity is perhaps the most profound secret of the Orvieto underground. It has been a sanctuary of the human body across utterly different epochs. What began as an Etruscan water project became a medieval economic heart, then a Renaissance defensive wonder, and finally a 20th century refuge from the sky. The rock itself is a witness, absorbing the carbon dioxide of anxious lungs generation after generation, holding those molecules in its porous breath. To walk there now with an experienced guide holding a dim lantern is to become part of this long, subterranean pilgrimage of survival. Every turn in the tunnel forces you to bow your head, ducking under ancient chisel marks, confronting your own physical vulnerability in a space that has no pity for human ego. Your fingertips brush walls that are cool, slightly moist, and granular, as if the mountain is slowly reclaiming its own, grain by grain, into the darkness. The human element of this mystery is not merely academic. It is deeply personal for the families of Orvieto, whose grandparents slept in these caves and whose great-grandparents made wine here. There is a property deed that still lists the underground grotto as part of a private home, a vertical extension of the living room that plunges into prehistory. A local restorer once told an interviewer about opening a sealed wall in his basement and feeling a rush of air that smelled of damp centuries and something else, something organic and forgotten. He held his torch into the void and saw the floor of an Etruscan granary, perfectly preserved, with a single clay lamp sitting in the center as if waiting. These chance discoveries are the nightmares of professional archaeologists who know that for every grotto that is mapped, a dozen more are destroyed by unrecorded renovations. The obsession takes hold of even the most rational minds. Speleologists speak of the Orvieto fever, a compulsion to find the next connection, the lost spring, the sealed portal. They spend weekends crawling through passages barely wide enough for a human torso, squeezed between volcanic teeth, driven by the mirage of a master map that will never be complete. One researcher spent 2 decades documenting a single interconnected system of 47 caves beneath a single city block, only to discover a sealed archway leading to the next block. His quiet despair was not one of failure, but of scale. The labyrinth is a fractal, revealing more complexity the closer you look. The city above modernizes, oblivious. Fiber optic cables are drilled through medieval cellars, and the vibrations of traffic shake the delicate equilibrium of underground frescoes. There is a tension between the living and the dead city. The needs of a contemporary tourist economy press down on the fragile archaeology sleeping below. Tour guides recount that there are places they no longer take visitors, not because of danger, but because the silence in those deepest chambers has grown too heavy to interpret. There is a point, they say, where the human voice begins to feel like a sacrilege, and even skeptics lower their speech to a whisper out of instinct. In that extreme silence, you can hear the dripping of water, the same water that the Etruscans diverted into their cisterns, still following the same path. Each droplet is a tiny clock, marking a timescale that stretches far beyond the brief noise of civilizations, a patient erosion that will outlast everything. That constant, percussive drip is the true voice of the underworld, reminding you that the stone is still alive, still changing, still shifting in its slow, geological sleep. Conservationists race to stabilize walls that have stood for 2,000 years, but are now threatened by climate shifts and the relentless cycle of wetting and drying. The underground, which seemed eternal, is revealed as fragile. A single broken water pipe in a modern hotel can wash away a layer of ancient plaster overnight. This fragility adds a metaphysical urgency to the documentation. We are trying to read a library of stone that is, very slowly, dissolving in the dark. Some of the strangest theories emerge from this sense of loss, including the notion that entire subterranean sanctuaries were deliberately filled in by church authorities to suppress unorthodox rituals. Early Christian hermits are said to have used the deepest, most isolated grottos for contemplation, leaving behind scratched crosses and ambiguous symbols. A few scratched symbols resemble no known alphabet, leading fringe historians to speculate about pre-Etruscan settlers, or perhaps a peculiar form of miner's code that has lost its key. Mainstream archaeology dismisses these as idle doodles from centuries of transient occupants, but the deeper you go, the easier it is to want them to be something more. The human mind recoils from randomness. It is more comfortable with a conspiracy than with the quiet chaos of overlapping, anonymous gestures in the dark. And so, the labyrinth becomes a mirror. What we see in its shadows is our own desperate need for a story, for a pattern, for a final revelation that makes the descent worthwhile. Perhaps the most astonishing fact is not a secret passage or a buried treasure, but the simple, staggering truth that the city above exists only because of the void below. Every ton of stone carved out and carried away became a building block for the houses. The cathedral's striped marble, the fortress walls, the visible city is literally a reinvention of the missing rock. The piazza, where you sip your coffee, is the inverted counterpart of the cavern beneath. A reciprocal hollowing out that turned a cliff into a civilization. If you stand on that piazza at dusk, when the cathedral's mosaics catch the last flame of the sun, you are standing at the intersection of two parallel cities. Beneath your feet, in the exact same coordinate in space, someone once pressed their own feet against a ceiling of stone and listened to the muffled thunder of a medieval procession above. The unanswerable question that haunts the speleologists at night is simple. How much have we already destroyed without ever knowing it? The underground of Orvieto is a vivid parable about the limits of human knowledge in a world where the past is not just buried, but actively being erased by the present. Every generation believes it has mapped the known world, only to discover that the world extends deeper, literally, than the map makers ever imagined. And so, the labyrinth endures, unsolved, its largest chambers perhaps still hidden, blocked by a deliberate cave-in that has not shifted since the fall of the Roman Republic. Perhaps the most profound truth of all is not what lies in the darkness, but the fact that we keep descending into it, generation after generation, lamp in hand, drawn by something older than reason. The underground offers no final answer, only an invitation to feel the weight of time, the fragility of memory, and the eerie privilege of standing inside a secret that will outlast us all. And as you climb back up into the light, the sound of your own footfalls on the ancient ramp is the sound of the universe patiently waiting, whispering that the greatest mysteries are still breathing beneath your feet.